Dr. Night Echoes.
The night we stayed in my grandpa's house still sits in my head in a way I can't shake. He'd passed only a day before, and we were all running on shock more than anything else. My grandpa was the toughest man I knew, but he had this tiny stuffed bunny he kept on a shelf in the living room. That night, while we waited for paperwork and arrangements, we tried to distract ourselves. We talked, we cleaned a little. At some point, my cousin pointed at the dining table and said, "Did someone move the bunny?" It was sitting right there, legs dangling over the edge. Someone laughed it off. We all assumed somebody had done it earlier, but an hour later it wasn't on the table anymore. It was in the den, propped on the armchair my grandpa always used. Nobody admitted to moving it. People swore up and down they didn't touch it. I started paying attention after that. I checked where it was before I walked into a room, then checked again when I came back. Every single time it had shifted. Sometimes only a few inches, sometimes to a different room entirely, always somewhere he used to sit. Nobody wanted to talk about it out loud, but the mood changed. The air felt heavier. We kept glancing at doorways like someone was about to walk through. The worst moment was when his cell phone, which we'd left on the kitchen counter, started calling the landline. No missed dial, no butt dial, just his number, lighting up the house again. I didn't sleep that entire week. And even now, when I think about how that bunny kept turning up wherever we were sitting, facing us like it was waiting for something, I wonder if maybe he hadn't really left the house at all. I was at my parents' place for the weekend, taking care of their dog while they were out of town. I'd avoided staying there for long stretches since my sister died in that house the year before. Even walking down the hallway still felt heavy, like the air held onto old conversations. I was passing through the living room when I heard something soft hit the carpet. A picture frame. It was one of my sister's. At first, I thought maybe the nail loosened or the frame shifted. But when I went to hang it back up, I noticed another frame on the floor across the room, then another in the hallway, and one more leaning against the baseboard under the window. Every single picture of her had fallen. 4 in total. All face down. Nothing else in the house was out of place. No rumbling, no vibration, not even a car passing outside. It was so quiet, I could hear the dog breathing behind me. I tried to talk myself out of the weird feeling creeping up my spine, blaming it on old walls or bad hooks, but the timing stuck with me. All of them falling at once. Only hers. I didn't stay much longer. I fed the dog, locked up, and drove home trying not to let my mind wander. When I walked into my apartment, I froze. On my desk, sitting right in the center, was a photo of me and my sister from years back. I hadn't seen it in months. I knew for a fact it was packed away in a box in my closet. I dug through that box a second time just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. The spot where it should have been was empty. Nothing else was touched. No drawers open. No signs someone had been inside. Just that one picture laid out neatly, like someone wanted to make sure I saw it. I still don't know how it got there. And even now, part of me won't let myself think too hard about the possibility that it wasn't an accident at all. My brother had been avoiding his room for weeks. He kept saying he couldn't sleep in that bed anymore because of the nightmares. Same dream every night. An old woman, face hidden in shadow, trying to climb toward him. At first, we all brushed it off as stress or some weird phase. But he got so exhausted, he started sleeping on the couch just to avoid going near that room. I didn't like seeing him that scared, so one night I told him I'd sleep in his bed and prove nothing was wrong. The room felt normal enough when I lay down. A little cold, but nothing strange. I fell asleep fast. The dream hit almost immediately. In the dream, I was lying in that same bed, in the same position, except I couldn't move. There was this slow scraping sound coming from the wall beside me. I tried to turn my head, but it felt like something was holding me still. Then the blanket shifted near my legs, like someone was crawling under it. I looked toward the gap between the bed and the wall, and she slid up from it, exactly how my brother described her. Thin, gray, hair matted flat. Her hands were already on the mattress, pulling herself toward me like she'd been waiting. She got hold of my ankle first, cold fingers, too tight to pull away. She kept inching higher, trying to drag me toward the wall. Her face stayed buried in darkness, but I could feel her breath on my leg, slow and wet. When her hand reached my hip, I snapped awake, yelling so loud my throat burned. I was drenched in sweat. My brother was already in the doorway, shaking. That was the last night anything slept on that bed. My mom looked into where the mattress came from. It was secondhand, bought cheap. She found out the previous owner was an elderly woman who had died on it, not in her sleep, not peacefully. My mom didn't tell us much more than that, and honestly, I didn't want details. We dragged the thing out of the house that same day. Didn't even try to sell it, just got rid of it. Looking back, we probably should have burned it. I was in high school when this happened, but it still sits in the back of my head like something unfinished. My friends brought an old Ouija board to a sleepover. It wasn't even supposed to be a serious thing. We turned off the lights, lit a couple candles, and started asking questions we didn't really think would go anywhere. At first, it moved slow, the way it always does when someone's pushing it for a joke. Then the answers started coming faster, sharper. The board spelled things none of us would have tried to joke about. One line that kept repeating, like it got stuck there. Let me in. One of my friends asked who we were talking to. The planchette scraped across the board so hard it made a sound. It spelled Satany. Not Satan, not anything clear, just close enough to make the room feel different. We stopped right there. No goodbye, no closing anything out. We just snapped the lights on and agreed the game was over. Somebody said we should get rid of it, so we all drove to the small church down the road and tossed the board into the dumpster behind it. It felt stupid, like overreacting, but none of us argued. The next morning I woke up to my phone buzzing non-stop. Pictures, videos, messages. The church had burned down overnight. Completely gone except for the stone frame and a twisted metal cross. People kept asking if we'd heard the thunderstorm, but none of us had. There hadn't even been rain near my house. The fire report a week later said the same thing everyone was already saying. Lightning strike, direct hit, whole building caught, no warning. I drove by the lot a few days after. They'd hauled away most of the rubble, but the dumpster was still there, or what was left of it. Everything inside had burned to ash. Everything except one thing sitting in the bottom corner, a piece of charred wood with the faint outline of letters still visible, the only part of the board that didn't burn. When I was around 8 or 9, I came down with chicken pox. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, itchy and miserable, calling for my mom the way sick kids do when they don't know what else to do. Instead of her, a woman walked into my room. She didn't turn on the light. She just sat on the edge of my bed like she'd done it 100 times before and started stroking my hair. Slow, steady movements that made my eyes feel heavy almost instantly. I didn't question it. I just assumed it was my grandma, even though something about her outfit felt wrong. The next morning, I went downstairs and asked where Grandma had gone. My mom looked confused and told me she hadn't been there at all. I tried explaining that someone had sat with me, even described the way she brushed my hair off my forehead. But my mom just smiled, like it was a dream, and moved on. I didn't think much of it until later that day, when my aunt came over to babysit me. She was the type who paid attention to strange things, and when I mentioned the woman, she stopped what she was doing and asked me to describe her outfit. I told her it looked like something from an old movie, a nurse's uniform, but not modern, more starched, more formal, the kind with the square hat and stiff lines. As soon as the words left my mouth, she got quiet. My family knew the people who owned the house before us. The wife had been a nurse in the 50s. She died only a few months before my parents bought the place. I didn't know any of that at the time. I only knew the room felt different that night, like someone else had been in it with me, even after I fell asleep. I still remember the weight on the bed, the slow brushing of my hair, the warmth of a hand that shouldn't have been there. My mom insists I imagined it. Maybe I did, but some nights, when I'm half awake, I swear I feel the mattress dip the same way it did back then. I was around 12 or 13 when this happened. I was staying the night at my friend's house, and his parents were gone until the next morning. We spent the evening being idiots, running around the neighborhood, ringing doorbells, just doing the usual dumb kid stuff. By the time we got back, it was a little after 1. Maybe closer to 2. The house felt too quiet after the chaos outside. We were in the living room when the doorbell rang. One sharp chime, not frantic, not impatient, just one. At that hour, it sounded wrong. My first thought was cops. His was angry neighbor. Either way, we froze. My friend had this little window by the front door. From inside, you could see the porch. But from outside, you couldn't tell anyone was watching. We crept up to it, trying not to make the floor creak. There was an old woman standing there. She wore a long dress that didn't look like anything from our time. Heavy fabric, patterned, something you'd see in a museum photo. Beside her stood a boy who couldn't have been older than 8. He wore a cap and short suspenders, like a newsboy from some black and white film. They weren't moving. They weren't talking. Just standing there in the porch light, facing the door like they had been waiting long before they rang. Neither of us recognized them, and we knew everyone in that small neighborhood. We ducked down fast. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. We waited maybe 10 seconds, maybe less. Then we looked again. They were gone, not walking down the street, not heading to a car, not cutting across the yard, just gone. The porch was empty, like nobody had been there at all. The street was dead silent. No engines, no footsteps, no movement anywhere. We stayed up the entire night because neither of us wanted to risk closing our eyes. Every small sound in the house felt like someone shifting just out of sight. In the morning, nothing looked disturbed, but I still remember that porch window and the space right outside it that 2 people should not have been able to disappear from. When I was 15, after getting home from school, I suddenly felt the urge to go visit my dad. My parents were divorced, but he lived within walking distance of my mom's house. Normally, I only saw him every other weekend and on Thursdays, but that day I really wanted to see him. He was an electrical engineer and often worked from home, so we hung out, watched TV, ate grapes and cheese, and played computer games. For some reason, I had this overwhelming feeling that something was going to happen, so strong that I actually started crying. He kept reassuring me that everything was okay, that he was fine. He said he was trying to get in to see a doctor, and then he dropped me off at my mom's on his way there. He died of a brain aneurysm later that night. I think he knew something was wrong. He had written lists of people to call, and when he dropped me off, he told me, if anything happens, this car, the S2000, goes to his girlfriend. I wish I had called him when he got home. I wish I had gone back over. But when you're 15, you don't think it's possible for your dad to die. I was maybe 16 when this happened, but it still hits me in the stomach when I think about it. I was up late because I couldn't sleep, and I figured making toast would give me something to do. The house was quiet in that way it only gets when you're completely alone. No TV, no wind, just the hum of the fridge and the click of the toaster. I stood at the counter eating, scrolling on my phone, not really paying attention. I must have been there at least 5 minutes. Everything behind me was exactly how I'd left it. Cupboards shut, drawers closed, kitchen normal. Nothing felt off. When I finished, I tossed my plate in the sink and turned around. Every cupboard door was open. Every single one. The cutlery drawer, too. All of them pulled out, like someone had been searching for something in a panic. I just froze. It wasn't the dramatic kind of fear. It was this cold, dense feeling in my chest, like my body couldn't decide whether to run or pass out. There was no sound before I turned around. No hinges, no footsteps, nothing. I know for a fact everything was closed when I walked in, and I was alone, completely alone. I just stood there, trying to make it make sense, but the longer I stared, the worse it felt. Like whoever opened them wasn't gone, like something was waiting for me to react. After a few seconds, I forced myself to move. I walked around the kitchen and shut every door and drawer one by one, trying not to look into the dark spaces they'd been hiding. Then I went straight to my room, locked the door, and waited for the sun to come up. I didn't sleep at all. It wasn't the only weird thing that happened in that house, but it was the first time I realized how quickly familiar rooms can stop feeling like yours. My mom's first husband was a Navy pilot during the Gulf War. The carrier he was on had been about 10 days into its cruise and was operating under complete radio silence. She hadn't heard anything from the ship since it left, but that was expected. This was a war. One night, about 10 days into the deployment, my mom suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. She saw her husband standing in the room. He didn't look ghostly or transparent. He looked solid, exactly as he always had. The only difference was that his head was shaved. He looked at her and said only one word, "Goodbye." The experience terrified her, and she couldn't fall back asleep. She went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. That's when the doorbell rang. Every military wife knows what a late-night doorbell means. She was informed that her husband had suffered a massive heart attack and died aboard the carrier. She was devastated, but she tried to convince herself the apparition had been nothing more than a stress-induced hallucination. After all, he hardly even looked like himself with his head shaved. Her mother and mother-in-law flew out immediately to help with funeral arrangements and to receive the body. My mom held herself together until the first viewing. When she saw him lying there, she froze. His head was shaved. Later, in a letter from his NFO, the shaved head was explained as the result of a lost bet aboard the ship. There had been no way for my mom to know that before the viewing. She suffered a minor breakdown after that.
Dr. NightEchoes.
Good evening. Tonight I bring you real night shift encounters. The kind that remind you that the world feels different when everyone else is asleep, and something else is awake. I started the nanny job a week after graduation, still trying to pretend I knew what adulthood was supposed to feel like. The parents left for their anniversary cruise, and it was just me and their 2 daughters in the house. By the second night, the younger one, Emma, kept drifting into my room after midnight. She always looked nervous, like she'd jogged there. Her excuses never made sense. One night, she asked if she should brush her teeth again. Another night, she asked what time the park opened, even though she knew it by heart. At first, I thought it was normal separation anxiety. She was 8. Her parents were gone. I let her ramble and tucked her back into bed. But after the 4th night of broken sleep, I finally told her she couldn't wake me unless something was wrong. I made my voice gentle so she wouldn't panic, but firm enough that she understood. She nodded like she was absorbing every word. That night, I actually slept. Around 5 in the morning, I woke up without knowing why. It felt like someone had tapped my shoulder, but there was no one near me. When I rolled over, I saw her. Emma had pulled a wooden chair from the hallway and placed it directly beside my bed. She was sitting upright, knees together, hands flat on her thighs. Her long hair hung forward, hiding half her face. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. She just stared down at me like she'd been waiting for me to wake up on my own. My throat closed up. I couldn't speak for a second. When I finally managed to ask what she was doing, she answered in a calm, almost confused voice, like I was the one being weird. "I didn't wake you," she said. "I just wanted to watch. You said I couldn't wake you anymore." She sounded proud of herself, like she'd followed the rules perfectly. I didn't sleep again after that. Not because she came back, but because I kept imagining the way she had said, "Watch." Like she wasn't talking about that night, like she'd been watching longer than I ever realized. I worked the night shift at a cinema that looked bright and modern, but everyone who worked there knew the truth about the land underneath it. One night during closing, there were around 8 of us doing the usual end-of-shift checks. We walked through the screens, bathrooms, and food areas to make sure every guest had left. The building had nighttime CCTV in each theater, so it was easy to spot anyone who stayed behind. We were almost done. The main doors were halfway closed when we all heard a long, slow creak coming from the guest bathrooms. It was the sound of a door being pushed open very slowly. Every one of us froze. We all had the same thought. Someone must still be inside. I went with another staff member to check the ladies' bathroom. When we stepped inside, the room felt colder than the hallway. All the stall doors were closed, except for the one at the very end. That one was standing wide open, like someone had just walked out of it. We checked every stall. Nothing. No bags, no feet, no movement. The whole bathroom was empty. We called building security to sweep the area, just in case someone slipped out while we were walking in. They checked everything: the screens, the hallways, the stairwells, the storage rooms. No one was inside. They even checked the CCTV again. Nothing showed up. No guest entered the bathroom after we started closing. No one came out. The doors shouldn't have moved on their own. They were heavy and didn't swing open easily, even during busy hours. No one talked much after that. We all finished closing in silence and got out as fast as we could. Strange things happened in that cinema all the time, but that night stayed with me. It felt like something was still walking through the place long after the last guest left. I worked the night shift in a group home for kids under 5. Most of them went home for Christmas visits, so that night there was only one toddler in the house. Because of that, I was the only staff on duty. The place already had a lot of ghost stories tied to it, and I'd had a few moments that made me uneasy, but nothing that really stuck with me until that night. I came in a little before midnight, did shift change with the previous worker, and they went home. I checked the rooms upstairs, saw the toddler asleep in his crib, and went back down to do the usual cleaning and food prep. After that, I put on a movie to stay awake. Everything was calm until I heard a loud bang from upstairs. It was sharp enough that I jumped. My first thought was the toddler, that maybe he somehow climbed out and fell. I pushed myself up from the couch, already heading toward the stairs, when I heard footsteps. Fast ones. It sounded exactly like a small child running across the floor above me. The sound was so clear that I pictured him in the dark, stumbling into furniture. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, heart pounding. I went straight into his room, expecting to see him on the floor or halfway out the door, but he was asleep, curled up in his crib, breathing slow and steady. He didn't even flinch when I came in. For a second, I just stood there, trying to figure out what I actually heard. There was no way the noise came from him. The house felt too silent now, like it was listening back. I went downstairs, made a full pot of coffee, and sat where I could see the staircase. Every small sound made me tense. I kept the lights on in every room I walked through for the rest of the night. Each bed check was fast. Open the door, glance in, get out. The toddler woke up around 6 like nothing happened. I didn't tell him anything, and I didn't say much during morning handoff either. But I never worked a Christmas shift there again. I worked the front desk of a hotel during college. My shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and the place stayed pretty quiet at night. One shift around 2 a.m., the phone rang. I wasn't really paying attention, so I picked it up while studying. I did the usual greeting, waited, and got nothing. No voice, no breathing, just silence. I figured it was a drunk guest and hung up. A few minutes later, it rang again. This time I checked the screen to see which room was calling. That's when I saw the room number, one we never used. It didn't even have furniture. No bed, no TV, no working phone. It was basically a storage room. The phone rang again. I just stared at it because answering didn't make sense. Something about the noise felt wrong. Still, part of me thought maybe someone had snuck in there. So I decided to check, but I wasn't going alone. I walked outside and grabbed the security guard. I told him I was getting noise complaints from that room because I didn't want to explain the real reason. We went up together. The hallway felt colder than usual. When we opened the door, the room was exactly how it always was, empty and clean. No phone, no wires hanging around, no sign anyone had been inside at all. We stood there for a minute, listening. Nothing. I went back downstairs and tried to focus on work, but every time the phone clicked or shifted, my stomach tightened. When my manager came in at 6 a.m., I told him what happened. He didn't even look surprised. He just said, "Oh, that's the wiring. Happens all the time." It didn't make sense. I'd worked there for months. I'd never seen the system glitch like that, not once. And he brushed it off way too fast, almost like he already knew what room I was talking about. I didn't push it, but after that night, every time the phone rang, I checked twice before answering. especially if the screen was blank. Working nights in the psychiatric unit always felt strange, even before everything was shut down. 2 of the wards had been closed for months. At night, there were only 4 of us on shift, scattered too far apart for comfort. I took my break in one of the dead wards because it was the only place where nobody bothered me. The room opened to a tiny courtyard through a heavy metal door with a swipe lock. That thing was built to withstand a riot. Fixed steel, multiple magnetic locks, the kind of door you had to lean your whole weight into just to open. It never moved on its own. That was the one comforting thing about it. I was sitting there in the dim light, scrolling my phone, when the door slammed open so hard it hit the wall. The sound snapped through the room like someone had fired a gun. I froze. That door wasn't supposed to budge unless someone forced it, and no one should have been out there. That courtyard had been locked for weeks. For a minute, I didn't move. I just stared at the darkness spilling into the room. The courtyard lights were dead, and the wind outside was loud enough that I couldn't hear anything else. My colleagues were behind multiple locked doors, too far to hear me if something went wrong. I told myself I should check, because that's what a responsible adult does. But honestly, my legs only worked because not moving felt worse. I got closer, step by step, trying to listen, trying not to breathe too loud. It was so dark outside that anything could have been standing there, just out of reach of the hallway light. When something shifted at the edge of my vision, I jumped so hard I nearly fell backward. I thought I saw a person, but when my eyes adjusted, it wasn't a person at all. A small shape waddled into the room, slow and casual, like it had been here before. A hedgehog. I actually yelled. Not a dignified yell, more like a dying crow. The thing didn't even flinch. I herded it back out and shut the door, making sure it's sealed. When I told the others, they shrugged and said, "Yeah, that door gives out sometimes." They said it wasn't a big deal, but that door shouldn't be able to open by itself. We all know that. And I still can't explain why it opened inward, toward me, like something had pushed from the courtyard side. I haven't taken a break down there since. My dad never scared easily. He worked nights for the city, spraying weeds around parks and abandoned lots. But one night, he came home pale, like he'd been sick. I'd never seen him like that. He told me he was assigned to the cemetery on the edge of town. It wasn't uncommon. Grass grows everywhere, even between headstones. But it was always quiet out there. He was halfway through the rows when he got this feeling, the kind you don't talk yourself out of. He said it hit him like someone had walked up behind him and whispered his name. He turned around, expecting maybe a deer, maybe a person who wandered in after hours. Instead, he saw a man sitting on one of the older headstones, about 50 feet away. The figure didn't move, just sat there with his hands folded in his lap, staring straight at my dad. Dad called out, told him he needed to leave because of the chemicals. No reaction. He tried again, louder, ready to walk closer if he had to. Still nothing. The man didn't even blink. He just tracked my dad with his eyes, slow and deliberate, like his head was too heavy to lift. Dad said the longer he looked at him, the more wrong the whole thing felt. Something was off about the way the man sat, too stiff, on a narrow headstone. He said he felt watched the entire time he packed up his gear. He tried not to look back, but he could feel that stare burning into the side of his face. When he finally did glance over his shoulder, the man was still there on the headstone. Same posture, same hollow stare. Dad left the cemetery without finishing the job, just drove home, hands shaking on the wheel. He always insisted it was probably just some strange old man sitting with a relative. But every time he told the story, he mentioned the same detail, almost quietly. He never stood up, never moved, and I never heard him breathe. I worked the overnight shift at a hardware store. At night, the store feels different. It's too quiet, and every sound stands out. There's one area in the back that none of us like. We call it Aisle 13, even though that's not its real name. Strange things happen there. Boxes fall off flat carts even when no one is near them. The carts don't move, and the floor is smooth, but you'll hear a loud thud out of nowhere. Products also slide off their hooks. Sometimes all the hooks shake at once, like someone hit the whole row. When you walk over, there's never anyone around. The footsteps are the worst. They're soft and slow. They always stop when you stop. It feels like someone is standing close behind you, even when you know the aisle is empty. A few of us have heard faint voices too, just short whispers, like someone talking quietly to themselves behind a shelf. There's also a smell. It's a sweet, old-style perfume. It comes and goes fast. You can walk through the aisle and smell nothing, then pass through again a minute later, and the scent is strong, like someone just walked past you. We try to blame other workers, but it never fits. We have a small night crew, and everyone sticks to their own sections. Nobody has a reason to be in that aisle unless they're assigned to it, but almost every night, someone hears something moving around there. I don't like walking through it, even for a second. The aisle feels wrong, the air feels heavy, and every time I'm in there, I get the same thought. Something is already watching me. Even when nothing moves, it doesn't feel empty. I was sitting at a desk in front of a big window, reading a binder, when I suddenly felt like someone was watching me. It wasn't a sound or a shadow, just that heavy sense of eyes on me. I looked up, and there was a face pressed right against the glass. He was so close, his breath fogged the window. I had no idea how long he'd been standing there. I ran out to the foyer. There was a glass door on the porch that was supposed to stay locked. It wasn't. As soon as I got there, he started shaking the door like he was trying to force it open. I didn't wait. I ran into the next room, and he followed me, moving around the outside of the house. Every window I passed, he was already there, staring in at me, just watching. I called the cops and stayed on the phone while he circled the house. I kept expecting him to smash a window or knock down a door, but he didn't. He just watched me move from room to room like he was waiting for something. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They searched the area but didn't find anyone. I barely slept that night. The next evening, just after dark, he came back. Same face, same stare, same slow walk from window to window. This time, the cops got to him in time, but I still can't shake the feeling of looking up from my desk and seeing him already watching me through the glass. I was closing up after a late catering event, mopping the floor, when I suddenly felt someone step up behind me. A man's voice said, "Pardon me," right over my shoulder. I moved aside without thinking, expecting someone to walk past. No one did. When I turned around, the room was empty. I tried to brush it off and finish my shift. Later that night, I went to clock out. As I walked under a dark balcony, something small hit me on the shoulder. I looked down. It was one of those big black binder clips, the kind that hold thick stacks of papers together. I looked up at the balcony, but it was completely dark. No movement, no sound. I kept walking. Another binder clip hit the floor right beside me. That's when I speed walked toward the time clock. Before I reached it, I heard a third clip land somewhere behind me, like something or someone was throwing them one by one, following me across the building. When I finally clocked out, the system automatically armed the building security. That only happens for the last employee in the building, meaning I was alone. I didn't stick around. I never told anyone, but honestly, I think they would have believed me. That place is famous for strange things happening, and it's gotten worse ever since. I used to work night shifts in an old courthouse that shared a wall with an even older arrest building. I never believed in the supernatural, but walking around that building alone at night made doubt feel pretty real. One night, I was halfway through my usual patrol when I noticed something move at the very edge of my vision. Just a small shape, low to the ground. I spun around immediately, but whatever it was darted quietly into a nearby corridor, always just far enough out of sight to make me question whether I saw anything at all. I froze, literally mid-turn, barely breathing. For a few seconds, I debated calling someone or just pretending I imagined it. Eventually, I forced myself to move, creeping toward the corridor and shining my flashlight around. Nothing. Which somehow felt worse, because the hallway's all connected. If something was in there, it could be anywhere now. I turned to continue my patrol, and there it was, behind me. Same quick movement, same size, same silence. The moment I looked straight at it, it slipped back into the corridor I had just searched. My heart dropped. I pivoted again, slower this time, and I saw it again. A quick, darting shape. But this time, something clicked. It wasn't following me, but it was mirroring me. Every time I turned my head, the movement came from the opposite direction. Perfectly timed, perfectly matched, like a shadow that didn't want to be caught. I finished the patrol very fast, and I never walked those halls again without every light on.
Dr. NightEchoes.
I was watching The Conjuring with my little sister when we both heard a key slide into the front door and turn, and the lock clicked, slow and deliberate, and the door pushed open just enough for the hinge to creak. We were sitting right beside the sliding door that faces the entryway, so the sound came through like someone was standing inches from us. And we did not panic at first, because our dad had just gone out, so we assumed he came back early. I called out, "Dad, you were back already?" But nothing answered, and when I tried again, the silence hit harder, and I felt something shift in the air. My sister was no longer rolling her eyes at the movie, and she sat, completely still, with her attention locked on the entryway. And then we heard a faint, scraping sound on the other side of the sliding door. Not footsteps, but a light dragging, like someone shifting their weight. I asked, "Dad, is that you?" And in my head, I kept repeating, "Please respond." But nothing answered at all. My sister backed toward the kitchen, planning to grab a knife, and she looked terrified and empty in a way I had never seen. We both froze, listening, as another tiny sound brushed against the door, almost like fingertips tracing the wood. I forced myself to walk up and open the sliding door as slowly as I could, and every inch along the track felt too loud, and I leaned forward, ready for something awful. The hallway was empty, and the front door was fully shut, and we had never heard it close. Relief hit fast, but something deeper stayed in the quiet, like the silence was watching us. I went to my mom, who was in her room, and asked if she heard anything, and she said she thought Dad had come home too, because she heard the front door open earlier.
Half an hour later, Dad finally came home, and he swore he had not returned at any point that night, and we still have no idea who unlocked our door or why it never made a sound going back shut.
I noticed the TV acting strange one night when I was home alone. I thought it was just the remote glitching because the screen kept pausing and skipping forward on its own. Then, the volume started climbing like someone was holding the button down. I kept checking the remote, replacing the batteries, unplugging the box. Nothing changed. Every time I sat back down, something else moved on the screen, like an invisible hand was testing limits. The first time it switched to a horror movie by itself, I laughed under my breath, telling myself it was a coincidence. But the movie asked for the parental PIN, and before I could reach the remote, the numbers typed themselves in. I stared at the screen, waiting for some logical explanation. The code failed. It tried again. Another failure. A third. Almost like something was learning. I changed the PIN immediately. For a couple days, nothing happened. Then out of nowhere, the screen went black. A single image flashed. Too fast for me to process. Then another. It kept going. Like a slideshow, someone was controlling on the other side. One image lingered long enough for me to see it clearly. A pair of wide cat eyes, staring straight ahead, washed out and too bright, like they had been photographed in the dark. I do not own any pictures like that. No one in the house does. I called the TV company again. They had said I was imagining things, but they agreed to send someone. The technician watched the screen, jump through channels, restart apps, enter numbers, flicker with random images. He kept asking if we had another remote hidden somewhere. He recorded everything and sent it off. Nobody ever came back with an answer. We replaced the entire box the same week. The new one has been normal, but sometimes, when the room is quiet and the TV is off, I swear I hear the faint click of numbers being typed. It was raining the morning my dad and I saw the girl, and we were leaving for school when I noticed her at the edge of our yard. She was small and barefoot, and she wore a white dress, and her hair was light and messy. She looked around the corner of our house and then ran out of sight. My dad and I stared at each other because we both knew we had seen the same thing. He got out of the car and ran around the house to look for her, and I watched him move through the rain, calling out for the girl. He came back a few minutes later and said the yard was empty, and he said he checked the whole area, and he called my mom to tell her a child might be outside, but nothing happened after that. No neighbors reported anything, and no one said a kid was missing, and we talked about it once and then tried to forget it. Months later, we were fixing up our basement, and my dad was tearing out a section of drywall, and he suddenly stopped working and went quiet. He reached into the open space and pulled out a small photo album that looked old and soft, and the pages were yellow. We opened it on the floor, and the first photo showed a little girl standing in a field, and she wore a white dress, and she had the same pale hair, and she looked exactly like the girl we saw in the yard. More photos showed her near the house, in places I recognized, and the album had a date on the first page, and it said 1922. We found out the family who lived in our house back then lost their daughter that year, and they lost the rest of the family soon after. I have not seen the girl again, but when it rains, I always look at that same corner. I was walking out of the graveyard after visiting a relative, and everything felt normal until the moment I stepped toward the gate, and my legs refused to move, like something held me in place. At first, I thought it was just fatigue, but then my shoulders pulled down with a pressure that felt deliberate, and my chest grew heavy, like the air around me had thickened into something I could not breathe through. My legs felt pinned to the ground by a weight that pulsed and shifted, and when I tried to lift my foot, I felt a tug that was too real to ignore. I kept telling myself it was only stress or exhaustion, but the sensation grew stronger, and it felt like fingers curling around my ankles and pulling me backward into the gravel path. I grabbed the arm of the family member who was with me, and I tried to speak, but my voice shook as I said, "It feels like something is draining me." They looked at me with this strange calm and told me that maybe something in this place wants the energy of someone young. Their tone made it worse because they sounded serious, not joking, and I felt a rising panic as the pressure moved up my legs and into my hips, like something invisible was climbing me. My vision blurred and the whole world tilted, and I thought if I stayed here another minute, something would take more from me than just strength. I tried to walk, but my knees buckled, so they had to pull me forward and almost drag me to the car. As soon as we crossed the outer path, the weight vanished, all at once, like something let go. I did not feel relieved, though. It felt more like something had followed me right to the edge, and only stopped because it chose to. My dad told me this story about something that happened when he was alone in the house one night. He wanted a small meal before taking a shower, so he grabbed a bowl of ulam and sat down to eat. Everything felt quiet and normal until the power went out and the whole room fell into darkness. He lit a candle and kept eating, but he said the air in the room changed, like something else had entered the space with him. A pale shape rested at the edge of his vision on the right side. He looked, but nothing was there, so he kept eating and tried to ignore the strange feeling. But the shape returned, again and again, like it waited for him to look away. He told me he began to eat faster because he did not like the silence or the way the light from the candle flickered toward that empty corner. He said the shape stayed with him the whole time, like it wanted his attention, but would not show itself fully. When he finally finished, he rushed to the sink and set the bowl down with shaking hands, and he felt this cold, prickling sensation along his cheek, like someone leaned in to look at him. He raised his eyes to the mirror, and for a moment he thought he would see someone standing behind him. Instead, he saw a small grain of rice stuck near his eye. He said it should have made him laugh, but it only made him feel worse because the shape he kept seeing had been at the same height as that grain, like it lined up with his reflection. He washed his face and left the room fast, and he said that even now when he thinks about it, he can still feel something standing just outside the reach of the candlelight, watching him finish his meal. I was very young when my family started staying at the holiday house everyone called the Bog. And even though my memories of it are faint, every adult in my family remembers what happened there, and no one likes talking about it for long. The house sat in the middle of wide peat fields, and the cold air always felt heavy in a way I could never explain. The first thing I remember is how the lights in the house acted like they had their own moods, switching off and on in rooms where no one was standing, and staying steady only when you ignored them. At night, I would hear slow footsteps in the hallway, and sometimes a tapping sound outside my bedroom door. And when I asked my mom, she told me it was probably the house settling. but she did not sound sure at all. My brother had a small nightlight that ran on batteries, and it kept turning off on its own, even when we replaced the batteries and checked the switch, and the same light worked perfectly once we got home. My toys never stayed where I left them either, and more than once, I found my teddies thrown across the playroom or tucked behind furniture, like someone had been playing without me.
My mum once heard the bedroom door open and tiny footsteps approach. So she lifted the blanket, expecting me to climb in, but the room was empty. My grandmother also had her moment on her first day, when her suitcase moved from the front door to her bedroom without a sound, and she scolded the air like something was listening, and she never had another issue after that. My grandfather saw 2 beds flipped onto their frames with no sign of a break-in, and he refused to come back to that house again.
The strangest part is that the cousins who owned the bog said nothing ever happened to them. And maybe that is the reason the place still feels wrong to me after all these years, because the house seemed to choose who it wanted. I was very young when my family started staying at the holiday house everyone called the Bog. And even though my memories of it are faint, every adult in my family remembers what happened there, and no one likes talking about it for long. The house sat in the middle of wide peat fields, and the cold air always felt heavy in a way I could never explain. The first thing I remember is how the lights in the house acted like they had their own moods, switching off and on in rooms where no one was standing, and staying steady only when you ignored them. At night, I would hear slow footsteps in the hallway, and sometimes a tapping sound outside my bedroom door. And when I asked my mom, she told me it was probably the house settling, but she did not sound sure at all. My brother had a small nightlight that ran on batteries, and it kept turning off on its own, even when we replaced the batteries and checked the switch, and the same light worked perfectly once we got home. My toys never stayed where I left them either, and more than once, I found my teddies thrown across the playroom or tucked behind furniture, like someone had been playing without me.
My mum once heard the bedroom door open and tiny footsteps approach. So she lifted the blanket, expecting me to climb in, but the room was empty. My grandmother also had her moment on her first day, when her suitcase moved from the front door to her bedroom without a sound, and she scolded the air like something was listening, and she never had another issue after that. My grandfather saw 2 beds flipped onto their frames with no sign of a break-in, and he refused to come back to that house again.
The strangest part is that the cousins who owned the bog said nothing ever happened to them. And maybe that is the reason the place still feels wrong to me after all these years, because the house seemed to choose who it wanted. I was walking home from college one afternoon, and it was a normal day, until something shifted in a way I cannot fully explain. It was a long walk, about 2 miles, and I had done it many times. I was near the edge of the town center, heading into a busy neighborhood, when I felt something strange rise in my chest. It was the feeling you get when someone is watching you, only stronger and sharper, like a warning. I looked around and realized every single person who passed me was staring directly at me. Not quick glances, but long, steady looks that followed me as I walked. A man waiting at a bus stop turned his head slowly and locked eyes with me. A woman pushing a stroller watched me without blinking. Even the kids walking home from school turned their heads at the exact same moment. I kept walking fast, but the stares did not stop. Cars passed me, and the drivers leaned toward their windows and looked at me too. One man turned a corner and his whole upper body leaned over so he could hold my gaze as he drove past. No one said a word. They only stared as if they knew something about me that I did not. My heartbeat felt loud in my ears and the air felt wrong, like the world had missed a step. I walked faster and faster, but everyone kept watching until I reached my street.
The moment I stepped onto my road, the feeling vanished, and everyone around me went back to normal, like nothing had happened. No one at home believed me, so I stopped talking about it. It never happened again, but sometimes when I walk through crowds, I still get that same cold drop in my stomach, like the world might shift again, and all eyes will turn toward me at once.